Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a very special top 10 Memorial Day 2024 episode. So for those of you who are not familiar with Memorial Day is a day in America where we honor the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice really, of those who gave their lives in past wars in American history. And I've always been very open with you guys. I have been free to share my past in some of these videos, and for those of you that don't know, I actually had an uncle who, while he didn't die in Vietnam, I would say, died because of his experience in Vietnam. It really shaped his life in a way, all the things he had to go through mentally, physically. The exposure to things like Agent Orange ended up basically killing him in the long run, but he did live well into the 2010s, so he lived a long life, but it was a very almost tortured life because of his experience in Vietnam. Thor, I miss you, brother. Hope to sit down one day with you again like we used to in the good old days, but he was one of the best uncles a kid could ask for. And so I honestly, just my 2 cents, I think it's shameful that the people who give the ultimate sacrifice with their lives get one day, and, you know, everyone else gets a month here. They want to do a year for one group, you know. I won't go any further down that road, but I honestly do think that one day is not enough for the people who have given the ultimate sacrifice for this country. That's just my 2 cents on the whole scenario. But so today it's going to be kind of a fun video, but also kind of a serious video, because these are 10 fragrances that mix in with Memorial Day in one way or another. One of them is a fun wear that I just plan on wearing tomorrow for Memorial Day. Some of them have some serious kind of backstories to them. One of them is my scent of the day that ties into this whole Memorial Day honoring the fallen. And so the first one we're going to talk about is my scent of the day, and it is Ottoman Empire by the House of Areej Dore. Now, he has done multiple iterations of this. This happens to be the very first one from 2017, okay? It is probably one of the largest fragrances I've ever experienced. The depth, the richness, it's almost like being at a coronation or kind of coming back to your country a hero after conquering faraway lands, right? The country throws you a triumph in your honor. It feels so large. You know why this fragrance is here? It's here because this fragrance reminds me of how sometimes the tides of history are so big that, you know, we're all just kind of caught up in what's going on in larger historical aspects around our life. Like the tides of history are pushing us down the river, washing us along. There are larger forces at play that are out of your control. For example, think of what Americans call the greatest generation. Imagine a kid who turns 18 as World War II is going on. He is drafted or has to go or wants to go fight. A lot of those kids back then thought very differently about service to their country. He wants to go fight, and he ends up dying at 18 years old. You know, that is just the larger tides of history coming along, like with what I mentioned with my uncle earlier in the video, right? Going to Vietnam, being drafted into Vietnam. He was too poor to pay for college or whatever it was, or get out of it, as some of the senators' sons did at the time. You know, he wasn't no senator's son. And so you just think about the larger tides of history. And Ottoman Empire, if you've never smelled it, by the way, is probably one of my favorite rose ouds ever. It is a huge rose oud, and so much depth and richness. And there's multiple types of rose, multiple types of oud in here. There's, according to the Areej Dore website, it's a fragrance that's filled with mysteries, with the heart of extravagant richness, and a character of unmatchable diversity, narcotic depth, and healing impact. Very well said. There is Jamaican pepper, cardamom, pure rose oil from Afghanistan, Georgia, and Bulgaria. So 3 different types of pure rose oil. Indian rose absolute, Thai white rose, jasmine and frangipani water freshly co-distilled by Russian Atom, infusion of frangipani flowers, saffron attar aged over 20 years, 3 types of Indian agarwood oil, including traces of an Assam oud that is nearly 2 decades old, clean Indian vetiver, cinnamon and nutmeg, and then the base of 7-year-old sandalwood from Bangladesh. The sandalwood is absolutely beautiful in here. Indian oak moss, crude amber resins, and sweet myrrh. So it is an amazing combination. I would urge you to check this out, especially if you're into the artisanal fragrances like I've been into lately. This is one to put on the radar. So Ottoman Empire, and this is it. This is all I have left. So I don't hold back. I wear my fragrances. If I wear this and it's all gone, hey, I wore it. Fragrances are meant to be worn. They're not meant to be hoarded, even though as I sit here with 600 fragrances behind me or whatever it is, 500 fragrances. But I do wear my fragrances, and even though we're down to the last couple drops here, I'm still going to wear it and enjoy it whenever I want, and maybe one day I'll find a bottle. But Ottoman Empire comes in at number 1 on the Memorial Day list. Number 2 is Polo Sport, and Polo Sport is, to me, you know, the reason that Polo Sport is on this list is twofold. Obviously, it has the American flag right there, and Ralph Lauren is an American designer. So, but the second thing is maybe more contextualized, because for me, I think about my days in the 1990s when my friends wore this. I remember I had a lot of friends who wore this. I didn't wear this when I was in school, like some of my buddies did in the locker room. After, you know, playing basketball, I remember them applying this on, or after football games applying this on. But really what this reminds me of is like a point in time. It reminds me of a point in time in the 90s for me that had this almost serene calmness, you know? Like there's no waves in the pool. The 90s had this unbelievable amount of calm to them. There was this peace, this tranquility. You could grow up. This was before Columbine and before some of the terrible things that happened with the terrorist attacks and all that stuff, right? Just felt like you were at peace. We were farther enough along where, you know, you had some technology, you could play video games and stuff like that in the 1990s, but your cell phone didn't dominate your life back then. There was no social media to be mad at your neighbor for getting something you didn't get. Well, obviously everyone's kind of jealous of their neighbors. That's just human nature, but it wasn't to the extent it is now with social media, I don't think. And it just reminds me of like the peace and calm. And part of me always thinks about like, you know, was that because I was a young man and I didn't realize what else was going on, or a young kid really at that point? Or was it really the times? I think a lot, even historians, modern historians that talk about modern history, talk about the 90s in a way that sort of, you know, is almost like idealized. Like we look back on that time with you know, rose-colored glasses, if you will. And I think that the 1990s, that feeling after the Berlin Wall fell, let's say, right? That feeling of America alone on top and this peace and serenity in the world. It was before the Iraq and the Afghanistan war that lasted way longer than anyone expected, right? It was before 9/11, and 9/11, I think, was kind of the day where that ended. Like, I feel like the 90s lasted until 9/11. 9/11 was like that shock that kind of woke the world up. Now we're in a new world, right? And Polo Sport represents that 90s serene, calm, you know, and if you're going to go for it, go for a vintage Cosmere bottle. One way to tell is it literally says Cosmere on the bottom. The other way is the metal atomizer. The new one's like a cheap plastic blue looking thing. And funny story, I actually bought a Cosmere bottle from a guy off of eBay. It was in a Cosmere box, but when it arrived, the bottle was the newer bottle. He put it in the Cosmere box and sent me the new bottle. I was so pissed. I mean, I was smart enough to figure it out. But there are some folks he probably would have tricked with that. So you have to be very careful when buying on eBay. Even if the box says something, you want to make sure, check the bottle, check the details to make sure they're all correct, right? And of course, it has the American flag on here. And as far as like fragrances that for Memorial Day in Texas, tomorrow is going to be Memorial Day. It'll be May 27th, 2024. And in Texas, it's going to feel like 100 degrees. So talk about fragrances that you could easily wear as your scent of the day. If you're going to go to a pool party, Memorial Day barbecue, something like that, this is one of those fragrances that fits perfectly into this type of weather. And speaking of Texas, I mean, where I'm at in North Texas, I'm in Denton County, and there were some terrible tornadoes that rolled through yesterday. I mean, it just barely kind of missed us to the north by, I mean, driving distance. I could get in the car and drive right now to where the tornado hit, and I think there were multiple casualties. So, you know, it's crazy. You have to always kind of cherish life, and every single day is a blessing. So, all right, so that's number 2, Polo Sport. Number three is, by the way, I should mention, Polo Sport, even though it's an aquatic, real quick before we move on to number 3, even though it's an aquatic and even though it's a designer and does have some synthetic aspects to it, I really like the way that Harry Fremont, I really think this is one of Harry Fremont's best creations, mixed in kind of slightly vintage notes, like the way that the creation was built. We'll talk about another aquatic at the end, which I'm probably going to make as my scent of the day tomorrow. But how he mixed in some of these vintage old school notes. There's some tarragon in here, which gives off that slightly anisic, green anise-like quality, very sharp. And there's some rosewood. I love rosewood in fragrances. There's geranium, cyclamen, ginger adds a little bit of freshness, but the base of sandalwood, amber, guaiac wood, cedar, and musk. It's not just an aquatic. You can see there's a lot more going on. Yes, it's fresh. Yes, it has a little bit of the synthetic tint, but man, this is like rose-colored glasses for me, like I said, and amazing for the heat. Absolutely amazing. I would wear this over something like Aqua de Joe or one of those pure aquatic fragrances any day of the week. All right, so that's Polo Sport. So number 3 on the list, and we're going to kind of bounce around different themes, different ideas that kind of came to my head for this video. Again, this is a fun video, just a way to talk about a lot of different fragrances, but it's also kind of it's a fun video, but it's a serious video at the same time. So number 3 is Creed Himalaya. And Creed Himalaya is on this list. This is actually my second bottle. I had an original, I can't remember the year. I think it was a 2010 bottle, around there. Maybe 2011, 2010, somewhere around there. But I had an original bottle, and honestly, this doesn't live up to what that bottle was. There was something so special about the opening of that bottle. It almost literally felt like a religious experience. This one's still good. But it kind of falls a little bit short. You can tell there's been reformulations or changes, or to my nose, they smell very different. Just in 7 years. This is a 2017 bottle, so right before Creed sold to initially BlackRock, and then BlackRock ended up selling them to Kering. So this fragrance is on the list because it's one of the earlier fragrances that use the note of gunpowder, to my understanding. And rumor has it that Pierre Bourdon worked on this fragrance while he was working at Dior. So it was always Pierre Bourdon's dream to make a fragrance for Dior, because his old man worked for Dior, and he finally got a chance to live out that dream in the 1990s with Dolce Vita, okay? Him and, I forget the guy's name, he was a bigger guy. He ran Dior. He was like the big boss at Dior into the late 90s, but he had health problems. He had to step down. Maybe something Roger Morin. I can't remember his name. If anyone remembers, leave it in the comments. But rumor has it that they had an agreement to create a gunpowder fragrance for Dior. And if you read the Ghost Perfumers book, you know that Olivier Creed was in the business of basically buying off these old I would say like creations that Pierre Bourdon made that didn't make it, right? These briefs that just didn't make it. And so he had one of the most talented perfumers making fragrances, and he would just basically give them to him for nothing because he didn't want the rejection of not having it be out there. So Olivier Creed basically convinced Pierre Bourdon, hey, it's worth it to have your fragrance out there in one way or another, and he agreed. And it's one of the reasons we have all these great Creeds, according to the book, The Ghost Perfumer, okay? So this is in the late 90s. This was probably going on. So in 2002, when it didn't make the Dior list, Creed ended up getting it and calling it Himalaya. All right, and the Creed marketing basically says, a fresh, woody, and adventurous fragrance, Himalaya fuses the power of man and nature to create a scent reminiscent of the beautiful Himalayan mountains. 100 mils, $470. And you can also add complimentary engraving. How kind of them. But yes, so it is a fragrance that, to me, always gave off this, especially in the first bottle, always gave off this religious-like feel. It was almost like I was raised Catholic. So you know what it feels like? It feels like you went to the shooting range early in the day. You woke up, you went to the shooting range, which I'd rather go to the shooting range any day than play golf. Just one man's opinion. But you go to the shooting range, let off some rounds, very relaxing hobby, by the way, and then you go to church, you dip your hand in the holy water, and you make the sign of the cross, because like I said, I was raised Catholic. But there's this smell when you walk into a Catholic church, right? There's this smell, well, most churches really, but for some reason Catholic churches specifically had this smell. Very specific scent, probably old incense being burned and stuff like that. And Himalaya is pepper. It's very peppery with that gunpowder accord, lavender, and that beautiful Creed cedar wood, sandalwood combination, maybe a little bit of that ambergris that they're known for, but very creamy, smooth sandalwood. This is a beautiful fragrance into the dry down. I really, really like Himalaya. Rumor is it was Michael Jordan's signature scent for the longest time. Maybe still is, I have no idea. But tonka bean, vetiver as well into the base, juniper to kind of freshen it up, and there's lots of citruses in the top, bergamot, lemon, and mandarin orange. It's a beautiful fragrance, but it just reminded me of maybe like sitting in church, praying for the folks who are fighting overseas or whatever. I remember being, you know, in college and the priest saying, hey, let's pray for the folks fighting in Iraq or something like that, right? But there's this feeling of almost like being in church and just, you know, praying to the higher power, whatever higher power you pray to, that everything will be okay, and for the folks who are literally putting their life on the line. That's why this is in here. So again, I said some of these are going to be probably contextualized into my way of kind of lumping them together. Very hard to make a Memorial Day list, but I did my best. Now, the next three are from the House of Beaufort. Beaufort is a London house, so to the Americans who are like, why is a London house in there? Sorry about that. But, well, Creed's a French house. I mean, for perfume, you're not going to get away from that. There's other French houses coming up. But this is a London house called Beaufort. And Beaufort is a very interesting house. They make fragrances that I would say are extremely challenging. If you're the kind of person that likes, let's say, art in a bottle, Beaufort is a house you should really check out. There are very few fragrance houses doing what Beaufort is doing, okay? So for me, number 4 is Iron Duke. And again, this is unranked. This is just 10 fragrances to discuss during Memorial Day, okay? So number 4 is Iron Duke. Now, Iron Duke is a fragrance that, for someone who's never actually been in a war, I would say, if you said, Ramsey, show me one fragrance that would instantly take you to the battle lines, to the front lines, this is it. Iron Duke, okay? And according to the Beaufort website, Iron Duke is a strikingly powerful fragrance with animalic depths. Iron Duke revels in and blurs the man/beast dichotomy. The fragrance creates an apparition of horse and rider, bright metal cognac, snuff, and saddle soap atop a base of oud, animalic leather, and hay. Okay, so everyone gets different things from fragrances. For me, this transports me to the front lines of a war. And it's like walking through a door and literally like opening your eyes through someone else's eyes, through their, you know, you're almost like in someone's head, like you can see through their eyes, right? And you know, you open your eyes and you're on this battlefield. You're in a tank, really. I know they say horse, but maybe you can get to that horse charge a little bit later. But for me, this is being in a tank on a battlefield, and just the smell of fear that all humans would have in that situation of dying is in the air, right? So there is this liqueur-like smell, almost like when you catch the after breath of somebody who just took a big swig of just straight alcohol, whiskey, or, you know, something like that, cognac or brandy, something along those lines, right? Hard liquor, straight out of the bottle, or a shot or something like that, probably shaking like a leaf, right? Because they're about to go into war, or they're in a war right now. And all of a sudden a shell explodes off in the distance. You can smell the smoke in the air. You can smell gunpowder and metal, grinding gears. And unlike the gunpowder accord in Himalaya, which, like I said, with Himalaya, it's like it feels like you went to the shooting range and maybe you just got a little gunpowder on your hands from shooting and it's easy to wash off. This feels like the smoke is in the air, okay? Like you can't breathe without breathing in that smoke. It's heavy, and it's a full-on battle, right? You're fighting for your lives. You can smell the cheap army soap that the men in your tank's unit are forced to use. You can smell the metal from the tank. You know, that terrible soap that dries out your skin the army makes you use. You can smell something burning off in the distance, right? And maybe if you wanted to add the horses in, maybe you think about Napoleon's army and the horse charges from back in the day and the cavalry and how important they were in war, that kind of thing, right? This fragrance does all of that. It is one of the most transportative fragrances. It's probably the reason I never prioritize buying a bottle of Amouage Royal Tobacco, which I really want, but I think both of these play in the same vein, but this is like a crazy, like a niche take on Royal Tobacco. Even though Royal Tobacco is a niche, this is like a niche of a niche. It is absolutely crazy. So yes, that is Beaufort Iron Duke from 2017, and it's still in production. Julie Dunkley is the perfumer, and hats off to her. She is a brave woman. Tobacco, liquor, metallic notes, Cambodian oud, and star anise in the top, with leather metallic notes, soap, animalic notes, and charred woods in the heart, which we'll talk more about that on the next one, with a base of gunpowder, hay, bourbon, whiskey, and musk. Crazy fragrance. But like I said, if you said, Ramsey, show me a fragrance that transports me to the front lines, it would be Beaufort Iron Duke. Okay, so staying with the Beaufort theme, number 5 is called Tonnerre. Tonnerre. There you go. This is a tester I got for cheap off of fragrancebuy.ca, I believe, if memory serves. The original bottles of this were called something else. They were called 1805. Okay, so the original bottles were called 1805, and it just had this sticker here. This was see-through. It wasn't black, so you can actually see the whiskey-colored juice in there. But 1805, to me, 1805 almost feels like it picks up where Iron Duke left off, okay? So I like Iron Duke because it's out there and it's crazy, but I think it's still wearable. Tonnerre is almost unwearable, even for me, okay? But it almost takes that next step. It's almost like your take is still rolling, all right? You kicked ass and taken names, and you're listening to General Patton's advice of making the other person die for their country to win the war instead of you dying for yours, right? And so you're kicking ass, you're taking names, you're rolling in the tank. Maybe you're in a Sherman in World War II or something like that, and you keep driving, and all of a sudden you get to the point where your shell exploded. And there is this charred, burning aspect that's in Tonnerre. I don't think I have to describe it any more than that, but it is literally like your tank rolled up on the spot where the shell exploded. There's even a blood note in Tonnerre. So, I mean, it's literally like you are rolling up on a just a massacre, okay? Smoky, woody, there's gunpowder and blood and brandy. So again, the guy next to you who's still drinking has now had a couple because he's all freaked out. Maybe he's not shaking as much, but he's still all freaked out. Bergamot, cypress, ginger, lemon, spindrift, bergamot again in the heart with grapefruit, woods, lime, atlas cedar, birch, cistus, fir, balsam, and amber. Julie Dunkley and Julie Marlowe, 2 Julies spelled the exact same way, very strange, created this fragrance. And I will tell you that this is one of the more challenging fragrances in my collection, just period. And, you know, I don't think I have to describe it any more than I did. What the Beaufort website says, which is BeaufortLondon.com, they say that Tonnerre is inspired by historical relics and the darkly evocative stories that surround them. Tonnerre employs bold ingredients and extremely high concentrations to conjure a uniquely powerful olfactory experience. Accords of smoke, gunpowder, blood, and brandy combined with sea spray and a penetrating citrus note, singularly bold in its composition, yet ultimately refined, provocative, and unique. I would take the refined part out. All the rest is true. The image is like a skull with smoke coming out of the nose and the mouth holes and all that. Very interesting perfume. 50 mils is only 125 bucks, honestly. And I found this at discounters for like 75 bucks or something like that. That's a steal for this type of perfumery for me. But yes, probably a 2 ml sample would have been enough, but I'm glad to have it. I will review it one of these days. But it's literally like putting yourself in the battlefield. It's crazy. It's from a storytelling aspect, though, right? If you're one of those people who like the artistic side of perfume, Beaufort is an amazing house. So number 6, staying with Beaufort. I don't have a bottle of this one, though, but I did have a sample, thanks to my brother Rich Bitch from across the pond, my brother from another mother, and this one's called Rake and Ruin. So Rake and Ruin came out in 2018, and Rake and Ruin is... Now we're talking naval battles, okay? We're leaving the land warfare and we're moving on to naval battles. So, you know, obviously Memorial Day, American type holiday. So maybe we're going to go to the War of 1812 and think about old Ironsides, right? And just imagine America with their 16 ships versus the greatest navy the world's ever seen with England's 500 plus ships, and still America was able to kind of strategically win a couple battles, the Battle of the Lake Erie, and protect Western New York from invasion. I've never smelled a fragrance so much that puts me on a ship, right? And so I just said with the first two, I've never smelled a fragrance that puts me on the front lines like Tonnerre and Iron Dew. Now I've never smelled a fragrance that puts me so much on a ship like Rake and Ruin. I mean, it's crazy. It smells like you can smell the cargo down below. You can smell the stale biscuits that the sailors are forced to eat every day. You can smell the gin that they drank, freshened with juniper. You can smell the wet sides of the wood ship as they're battered by waves and the kind of sea marks and sludge from the sea, right? You can smell the smoke literally when the cannon fires. And, you know, the smoke almost sometimes feels so thick, it's almost like the ships can't see each other until they're right up on each other. There's a green aspect to this. There's some angelica and coriander and pine needle. So the angelica and pine specifically come about to add this green, slightly green tilt to it. But there's all kind of animalic notes. There's costus, which smells like wet dogs, like maybe, you know, there's so many rats on the ship and they almost have this animalic smell to them. There's cade juniper along with labdanum. Both give off a smoky feel. There's actual smoke in the top. There's Sichuan pepper, which I remember really liking that Sichuan pepper accord. If you're a Sichuan pepper fan like Journeyman, check out Rake and Ruin. And then there's a licorice note, and it dries down to like a woody, musky thing. It's crazy. Just an absolutely crazy experience. I don't know if I need a bottle, but it's if you're a fan of the artistic side of perfume, like what the old Amouages used to do, Beaufort's a house you have to check out. And so according to the website, Rake and Ruin is inspired by the works of satirist William Hogarth. This fragrance summons his characters from a gin-soaked 18th century London. This debauched eau de parfum, incorporates the botanical ingredients of gin, dark woods, civet, musk, and amber, bringing to life all manner of vice and wickedness. Well, it smells like a ship to me. So, again, it's quite the creation. Okay, number 7. Now we're going to jump back to the French, away from the British, back to the French. And now we have Bleue. So Bleue is on this list at number 7. Again, this is unranked. This is just 10 fragrances to talk about Memorial Day. And obviously this was done by a Frenchman, I know. But to me, this is one of the great, how would you describe this? To me, it's almost like the perfect fragrance that embodies the sadness and cataclysms and like melancholy and infinite sadness of war, okay? Because this is done right before World War II. And like I said, obviously Jacques Guerlain is a Frenchman, but it's anise, bergamot, carnation, neroli, iris, vanilla, benzoin, tonka bean, and violet, okay? And I've reviewed a couple fragrances that now smell like Bleue, and even came before. There was a fragrance from the house of Grossmith, which I reviewed on the channel. Check it out. There's only a couple Grossmith reviews. One of them was very, very similar to Bleue, but it came out a couple years before Bleue, apparently. But this is still one of the greatest fragrances of all time. And it's the fragrance that I would say inspired the perfect fragrance quote. One of the greatest fragrance quotes. I think probably the greatest fragrance quote I've ever heard. Jacques Guerlain said that he felt something so powerful and so moving that he could only express it to the world in a perfume. I mean, that is like the perfect embodiment of why we love fragrances, right? And this fragrance will make you feel something. I mean, it refers to the Bleue basically refers to the hour at the end of the day when the sun is setting, right? And the sun is basically below the horizon, and yet there's still that purple hue of light, right? Full dark hasn't happened, but there's still some light, but it's obviously at the end of the day, the suspended hour or the blue hour, okay? Now, it's easy to make the metaphorical leap that it's not just the sun setting on a particular day, but it's the sun setting on an entire era or an entire age, okay? Because darkness basically falls on mankind. You know, this is right before World War II and all the young men that were basically chopped up to death in the killing fields. Just read the poem Flanders Fields to get a sense of the horror of World War I. I mean, it was absolutely horrendous how many people died, the way they died, the gas attacks, the trench warfare, you know, and then at the end of the day, they both ended up almost exactly where they started in the trenches. Just absolutely insane. And, you know, tragic really when you think about it. This is a very moving fragrance. Like, if you're going to sit home and be by yourself all day and just kind of let your brain wander and think, there is not a much better fragrance than this, but it can be very moving. This is a vintage version of the Eau de Toilette. The heliotrope does an amazing job of adding that purple, pudgy, thick, you know, Play-Doh-like feeling to this. I love this. I absolutely love it. Again, 1912, right before World War I, and almost like the greatest foreshadowing of all time, because there is a sadness to this fragrance. There really is. There's like a end of an era, end of an age. And so yes, that is Bleue in any form. I would love to get the extrait one day. I need to smell, I need to smell the extraits of Bleue, Chamade, Samsara, all these extraits that I never got a chance to smell. I really need Jiki. I want to smell Jiki extrait. Chanel has some extraits I would love to smell. I've never smelled any of those Chanel extraits. Coromandel, Quai de Russie. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent here. Number 19 extrait I've never smelled, but yes, it's on the list. But Bleue, if you've never experienced Bleue in any form, I have the Eau de Parfum and the Eau de Toilette. I'm sure the extrait is even better, but in any form, it's amazing. Give it a shot. Okay, number 8. Excuse me whilst I hydrate. Number 8 is Rochas Femme. So Rochas Femme is one of the greatest fragrances of all time, in my opinion, done by one of the greatest perfumers in all time. According to Parfumo, it came out in 1945. Now, the Rochas website says it came out in 1948. Parfumo says 1945. And 1945 is the year World War II ended, basically. So, I mean, World War II was still going on up until April, May, June, I forget the exact day, but I know that through the beginning months of 1945, let's just say, war was going on still. And so if Parfumo is right, you have to think this probably came out right after World War II. And I get images of like ancient conquering military cultures. Like for me, this always reminds me a little bit of ancient Rome because of the decadence, you know? There is this feeling of being drowned in wine and beautiful women and just going overboard. Although I know this is a fragrance made for a woman. And it's funny, there's a quote according to Marcel Rochas who says, "One must be able to smell a woman even before seeing her." Femme captures the style of his sculptures and highly sensual designs. I think someone said, this is supposed to be like the shape of a woman's hips or a woman's bodies, or there was a famous woman this was literally designed after, her curves. She had legendary curves, apparently. I don't remember who. If anyone remembers, leave it in the comments. But Rochas Femme is kind of like this blend of an Oriental and a Chypre together, okay? And it just kind of marks the end of an era for me, right after World War II. Again, shifting gears, but also there's this conquering feeling. I always think of the ancient Romans and, like I said, the decadence and, you know, you think about the old stories. I know there were stories of like Caligula would invite senators over to his mansion or whatever for dinner and then just say, take their wives upstairs or something, right? This fragrance like embodies this decadent feeling because of the thick apricot and plum and this just dripping sexualized like decadence in this fragrance. I love it. For a man, give this a try. Don't shy away from this because it says femme. I really think this and something like Guerlain's Mitsuko. There are some fragrances made for women that are just absolute must-tries. Bleue, you have to try these fragrances, but there is definitely this conquering hero side to Rochas Femme to me, as a man wearing it, okay? Number 9 is probably the archetypal fragrance for this video. It is like the fragrance that probably should have been at the end, but I want to end on a high note, or on a fun note, let's say. This is ending on a high note, really. So number 9 is L'air du Temps by Nina Ricci. Now, L'air du Temps, if you guys are not familiar with it, I have one of the bottles that has just a splash, so it doesn't have the famous top. But L'air du Temps was created in 1948, and many of the bottles have 2 turtle doves on top. Okay, turtle doves are like the symbol of peace. Okay, so it's almost like peace be with you. Every time you put L'air du Temps on, the idea was you were basically saying peace be with you to the world. So if you were a woman applying this, you were basically saying, let us never forget the horrors and the tragedies of war. And now it seems many of our leaders, which are really misleaders, have forgotten those lessons. And you know, they talk about things like nuclear war like it's no problem. But we live in terrifying times. But L'air du Temps came right after those terrifying times of that generation ended. Okay? And so the idea with L'air du Temps was to spread peace throughout the world. The notes were neroli, rosewood, spices, bergamot, and peach with carnation, lily, ylang-ylang, iris, may rose, and orchid, sandalwood, ambergris, benzoin, moss, musk, cedar, and vetiver. Francis Fabron is the perfumer. And you know what? For a floral fragrance, I could easily wear this. I don't wear it very often because it is a heavy floral, very floral, slightly powdery. I like the woods and the spices and the mossy, woody vetiver dried out. I think a man could easily wear this, but I think this would smell amazing on a woman. Again, 1948 is the release date, and some of the advertisements with those crystal turtle doves, it literally says peace on earth. Like, that was the message. This message of goodwill towards men is brought to you by from Paris by L'air du Temps, a Nina Ricci perfume. Beautiful. I mean, how can you top that, right? So this probably should have been at the end, but I wanted to end on kind of a fun note. A fragrance that I think fits perfectly into modern day Memorial Day celebrations, right? So you're going to go to a barbecue or a pool party or something like that, right? This is the fragrance I'll be wearing. I'll probably wear it as my scent of the day tomorrow. It is Creed's Erolfa, and you can see how much I love this. This is my dent. I got this brand new. Well, it's a vintage bottle, but I got it new. It was unsprayed when I bought it. Fresh, aquatic, but done in a way, the way I like my aquatics done. Both of these are done in a way I like my aquatics done, okay? And what I mean by that, and this is a Pierre Bourdon, even though Parfumo doesn't say it, I would bet pretty much anything this is a Pierre Bourdon. It smells like a Edmund Rudnitska redone, okay? And this is right before Edmund Rudnitska died. So I think this is one of like the turning points in Pierre Bourdon's career, where he was really still making these fragrances that riffed off of Edmund Rudnitska's work. If you've ever smelled Ocean Rain, which came out 2 years earlier, okay, and then smelled Erolfa, or if you've ever smelled his work for Frederic Malle, which I don't know if I have it here, but let me just check. Yes, I do. Le Parfum de Thérèse. This is a vintage bottle before Estée Lauder purchased Frederic Malle. And this is a masterpiece. If you've ever smelled what he did with stuff like this or this, you'll smell bits and pieces in Erolfa, okay? So Erolfa is a aquatic that uses all of these other notes that almost shock you a little bit in an aquatic. So for example, there's green basil and rosemary, which makes the fragrance very masculine, okay, to me. And there's cumin in the top, so it's very spicy. Cumin in an aquatic sounds crazy. It works perfectly. The spiciness of it, the depth, the transitions. There's almost like a note that feels like green pine. Even though there's no pine, I wouldn't be surprised there was cypress or pine or something in here. There's coriander. There's a freshness of ginger, and most importantly, there's this aquatic melon, which was so popular in the 90s, and then he really popularized it with Millésime Impériale by Creed. But Erolfa is one of my favorite warm weather wears. It's going to be 100 degrees tomorrow for Memorial Day. Well, it's going to feel like 100. I think it's going to be in the 90s. And this is what I will be wearing. So this is my fun finish to a fun but also sincere and serious type video. So I guess, you know, in closing, you have to kind of say thank you to everyone who has served in the military, has family who have given their lives or you know, served in one way or another, any capacity. So it's a special day for all of them and their families, and I think it should be honored and remembered more than just one day is the Rams message. But they don't ask me these things. If they did, I would give them my opinion. I am giving them my opinion. They just don't listen. So anyways, but thanks for watching as always. Have a great Memorial Day, everyone. Cheers, guys. And I'll hopefully be back tomorrow with another video. Bye-bye.